then I get too much back. I'm not usually used to like hearing myself in real time.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So, and I don't like that so much.
Now you would think you've been singing all these years.
I don't usually perform without amplification. So.
You know, even opera singers now sing with fine.
Hey! Front center! Very tenuous moment. Yeah. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
I'm going to try that again. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's wonderful to have us all together again for a share Shabbat, which we haven't been able to do for a while. We've had sort of share Shabbat with our share Simchat Torah and Sukkot, but it's nice when we can come together and just have a nice Shabbat dinner and enjoy a more relaxed type of a service with more sing-along type of music. We hope that that means that you will join in with us and sing along with us. So just take a moment to welcome your neighbors if you can. Say hello. Wish the person next to you a Shabbat Shalom. Take a moment to sort of breathe out all of this past week as we breathe in this fresh air of Shabbat, as we get our extra neshama, our extra soul. And we'll begin with a little bit of music.
Please join in me with this nigun, our wordless melody. Hope everyone was able to pick up a song sheet on their way in. We will begin singing words together with the words of Lechi Lach, which relate to our Torah portion.
Lechi Lach, to a land that I will show you. Lech Lecha, to a place you do not know. Lechi Lach, on your journey I will bless you, and you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. Lechi Lach. Lechi Lach, and I shall make your name great. Lech Lecha, and all shall praise your name. Lechi Lach, to the place that I will show you. Lesimchat Chaim, Lesimchat Chaim, Lesimchat Chaim, Lechi Lach.
We continue together with the words of Lecha Dodi, and we will only sing the verses that are in front of you.
Lecha dodi likat kalai, halalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likat kalai, halalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Shamu v'zachu b'dibur echad. Ishmianu Elam Yuchad, Adonai Echad, Shemo Echad, L'Shem Ultiferet V'li Tehila. Lecha dodi likat kalai, halalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likat kalai, halalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor haberacha, merosh mikerem nesucha, sov ma'aseh b'machshava techila. Lecha dodi likat kalai, halalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likat kalai, halalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoriri, hitoriri, ki va'orech umi hori, uri, shir daberi, kevod Adonai, halayik nigla. Lecha dodi likat kalai, halalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likat kalai, halalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom materet bala, gam b'simcha u'b'tzola, toch emunei ham segula. Boi chala, lecha dodi likat kalai, halalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likat kalai, halalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
We welcome in our angels with Shalom Aleichem. as the angels.
Shalom Alechem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Zeirchem l'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
We turn now to our prayer cards. Hopefully you have either one that is, I'm going to guess, salmon, or one that is kind of a buff color, whichever one you need, depending on your familiarity with Hebrew. If you are a Hebrew reader, you will want this one. But for now, we're going to begin with English, which can be found on both of them at the top of the page. So please join with me. We live in a very busy world, but we put aside one day every week for rest. That day is Shabbat. Shabbat is the time that we come together to be with ourselves, our families, our friends, and with God. Let me learn to pause, if only for this day. Let me find peace on this day. Let me enter into a quiet world this day. God, we thank you for our special holy day. We thank you for helping us make our lives holy through this celebration of Shabbat. We begin with Shema and its blessings as we call ourselves to worship with the Baruch Hu. If you are able, please rise.
Yael, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu,
be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
And the women dancing with the timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. And Miriam was a weaver of unique variety. The tapestry she wove was one which sang our history. With every strand and every thread she crafted her delight. A woman touched with spirit, she dances toward the light. And all the women dancing with the timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. When Miriam stood upon the shores and gazed across the sea, the wonder of this miracle she soon came to believe. Whoever thought the sea would part with an outstretched hand, and we would pass to freedom and march to the promised land. And the women dancing with the timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. And Miriam the prophet took her timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her just as she had planned. And Miriam raised her voice in song, she sang with praise and might. We've just lived through a miracle, we're going to dance tonight. And the women dancing with the timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות תוסיף אלה, נורא תהילות תוסיף אלה. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה מרים,
We rise now for the tefillah.
Adonai, Sefatai tiftachu fi agit ilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, v'Konei HaKol, v'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה.
We pray together in English at the bottom of the page. God, each of us hears you differently, yet you are the one God for us all. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob each heard you in a different way. To Abraham you gave courage. To Isaac you brought comfort. Jacob learned that you are everywhere, even in places he didn't expect to find you. Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah each heard you in a different way. To Sarah you brought laughter. To Rebecca you gave strength. To Rachel you taught kindness, and to Leah you brought love. May each of us hear you in our own special way, and may we always feel your protection. We praise you, eternal God. You are the shield of Abraham, the help of Sarah, the one God of all Jews and all the world. Please be seated. We'll take just a moment now for our own silent prayers and meditation.
May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. You ratzon imrefi vehegion libi lefanecha. Adonai tzuri vegoali. Adonai tzuri vegoali.
We now come to our Torah service. If you're able, I invite you to please rise.
Ein kamocha v'Elohim Adonai ve'ein k'ma'asecha, malchutcha malchut kol olamim, u'memshatcha b'chol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, Adonai hoz le'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adoninu, Kadosh Shmo. Gadol Adonai iti, u'marama Shemo yachdav. Lecha Adonai hagedula v'geura v'tiferet v'anitzach v'haod. Ki kol b'shamayim u'va'aretz, ki kol b'shamayim u'va'aretz. Lecha Adonai הממלכה והמתנשאים לכל ראש.
You may be seated.
Not used to it being on this side. If we want to follow along, if you picked up one of the Plaut Chumashim, you may follow along by looking at page 91, where we'll be beginning the Torah portion Lech Lecha, which is why hopefully you paid attention to the thematic Lechi Lach that we sang at the beginning of our service. This is our third portion of this new year of reading our Torah. In it, we hear about the story at this point of Avram being called to go forth, to go out of his father's home. And unfortunately, as a result of that, his father Terach had to die in the last portion because there were too many myths that were not going to allow him to continue on. But if you looked at the end of the last chapter, you'll have seen that he was already on his way into Canaan with his father. But here in this one, we see that God tells him to leave his father's house. And so therefore, we have no need for Terach. There's a lot of interesting commentary to be said about this portion because as we have so much narrative, we have so many of these stories that keep coming up and up For instance, the story of him passing off his wife as his sister. We have our first one of those episodes in this week's Torah portion as well. So if you'd like to follow along, you may do so on page 91. We'll join together for the blessings before Torah. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach, Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai, noten ha'torah. Vayomer Adonai el Avram, lech lecha me'artzecha, u'mimoladetcha, u'mibeit avicha, el ha'eretz asher areka, ve'escha legoy gadol, ve'varechecha ve'agadla shemecha, ve'hiye bracha, ve'avarcha mivarechecha, u'mikalelcha aor, ve'nivrechu v'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama, ve'yelech Avram ka'asher diber elav Adonai, ve'yelech ito Lot, ואברהם בן 570 שנה בצאתו מחרן. ויקח אברהם את שרי אשתו ואת לוט בן אחיו ואת כל רכושם אשר רכשו ואת הנפש אשר עשו בחרן. ויצאו ללכת ארצה כנען ויבואו ארצה כנען ויעבור אברהם בארץ עד מקום שכם עד אלון מורה והכנעני אז בארץ. וירא אדוני אל אברהם, ויאמר לזרעך אתן את הארץ הזאת, ויבן שם מזבח לאדוני. הנראה אליו, ויתק משם ההרה, מקדם לבית אל וית, אוהלה, בית אל מים והעי מקדם, ויבן שם מזבח לאדוני, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויסע אברהם הלוך ונסוע הנגבה. Please join me in the second blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. The Eternal One said to Abram, or Avram, go forth from your land, your birthplace, your father's house, to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and it shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will pronounce doom on those who curse you. Through you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram went forth as the Eternal had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai, his brother's son Lot, all the possessions they had amassed, and all of the nephesh is the word they used, but all the people that they had acquired in Haran. They set forth for the land of Canaan, and they arrived in the land of Canaan. Abram then traversed the land as far as the sacred site of Shechem, as far as the oak of Moreh. At the time, the Canaanites were present in the land. The Eternal now appeared to Abram and said, I am giving this land to your descendants. Abram then built an altar there to the Eternal who had appeared to him. From there, he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel. He pitched his tent between Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built another altar to the Eternal and called upon the name of the Eternal. And then Abram continued his journey toward the Negev. It's exciting that we're going to Israel, and we're going to be going into the Negev very soon in January. So I get excited when I hear Negba. We're going down to the desert. And I love that sound. While we have the Torah in our midst, it is time for us to focus our thoughts on those in our community who are in need of our feelings of community, our sense of community, a sense of strength, a strength of knowing that we are thinking of them and that we are praying for their healing. At this time, we think especially of Flo Schmall, Julie Wagner, Joanne Weinberger, David Woods, Eleanor Must, Ann Burke, Eileen Eady, Ruth Meadow, Catherine Cooper, Rachel Magdalene, Ruth Hirsch, Sid Gross, Sharon Hatcher, Dave Cox, Cicely Nathan, Jim Locke, Linda Dean Harris, Marty Sacker, Gary Pasternick, and Bob Kahn. We also remember those in our community whose names you want to bring forward at this time. Please do so as my hand goes across the room. Beatrice Bodney. Mishaberach Avotenu v'Imotenu, Mishivarech v'Rapeh et Acholim. May the one who has blessed and kept our ancestors in every generation continue to bring blessing and healing among those in our community who are in need of healing. Baruch atah Adonai Rofei HaCholim. We continue with the words of Mishaberach.
Mishaberach Avotenu Mekor
If there's anyone who would be interested in helping to dress the Torah tonight, I'd invite you to come forward. It's an opportunity you don't often have because we usually have 2 rabbis up here. Nobody? Thank you, Steve. I invite everybody to please rise as we lift and dress the Torah.
V'zot haTorah shesav Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe.
This is when it's always good to have someone who is left-handed lifting the Torah when we get to this time of year. But I am not left-handed, so if anyone's interested in lifting the Torah for the next several weeks, please feel free to volunteer. This evening I have one of my favorite stories to share with you, which is a story about a mysterious case of laughter from the Baal Shem Tov. The story goes, and the Baal Shem Tov took Shabbat very seriously and was very much present, but not in the way that we think of Shabbat, but very ingrained in his thought, right? He was really, his head was sunken, his mind was focused on the prayers, and he was seated at his table with many scholars, and they all sat there silently. Finally, after this moment of focus, this moment of bringing in Shabbat, the Baal Shem Tov arose. I can't speak this evening. The Baal Shem Tov arose and began to say the blessings over the wine, lifting up his glass. All at once, he came from this pensive moment to a moment where there was a shine over his face. Joy spread through his cheeks. He raised his glass, he threw back his head, and he started laughing. He laughed until there were tears coming down from his eyes. The scholars were not allowed to ask questions. They couldn't understand what might have caused the rabbi's laughter. So they just looked to one another. They looked at the rabbi. They looked all over the room, but nothing was different. It looked as they were expecting. The candles were burning, casting their light upon the table. They looked upon the plates with the Shabbat meal, the cups of Shabbat wine that they had just blessed. And then the Baal Shem Tov stopped laughing. But the sadness was gone. He drank from his wine. He sat happily to his meal. He then began to eat his meal of this fish, and suddenly, again, he set down his hand. His eyes looked far away, and he broke out again in laughter. During the entire Shabbat, it was the custom of the scholars never to ask questions. So even though he's laughing, they could not ask him why this sudden and strange joy. Instead, they ate, they looked at one another, and they kept wondering. And a third time, when Rabbi Israel was eating soup, he broke out into laughter. This time, he laughed with the easy contentment of a father watching his children at play. That night and all throughout the rest of Shabbat, the students gathered in groups. And of course, they all wanted to talk about the rabbi's laughter, because 3 times he had laughed. They looked to the Torah to see if there was an explanation, but they could find no answer in the Torah. Once Shabbat had ended, in this evening after Shabbat had gone out, it was the custom that one scholar in the entire community was able to go into the cabin of the Baal Shem Tov and answer any question that they had come up with during this entire time of this period of rest of Shabbat. And as it was, the scholars agreed to choose Rabbi Wolf, who was the one that they wanted to approach the master. And this time, the question that was asked, I'm sure you can only imagine, why had the rabbi broken out 3 times into laughter during the Sabbath meal? And so the Baal Shem Tov responded when he was asked the question in the way that is typical. He did not answer it. Instead, he said, let's come into the wagon and we're going to take a trip. So all of the men of the town came together. They got into this wagon, and they quietly, silently rode and rode. They rode for hour after hour all throughout the night. On Sunday morning, they found themselves in a village they'd never seen before. The rabbi stopped the wagon in front of a tiny synagogue. He got down and he called to the Shamash. Soon it was known among all the Jews in this village that the great Rabbi Israel, the Baal Shem Tov, was among them. They all ran towards him to seek his blessing. And finally he asked, are all the Jews of the village here? Of course, the head of the congregation looked from one end to the other and said, yes, all of them are here. But Rabbi Israel looked among them, and he says, but where is Sabbatai, the bookkeeper? The Shamash ran at once to call this older man, Sabbatai. In a moment, the Shamash returned, followed by a small gray-haired man whose blue eyes shone on his mild face. Let his wife also be called, said Rabbi Israel, and they sought for her as well. Rabbi Israel asked for them both to stand in the center of the marketplace. Again, we're still trying to come up with the answer to the question of why was he laughing. I just want to remind us of this. And so he says, "Tell me, Sabbatai, exactly what did you do on last Shabbat Eve? But tell me everything, and do not be ashamed or afraid to speak." "Master," he said, "I shall indeed tell you everything that happened to me and what I did. And if it's not God's will, then I will be punished." The aged bookbinder told his story. "You must know that since my youth I have lived in this village and practiced my craft as a bookbinder. In those early years when I was filled with vigor, I was able to manage a thriving business, and I lived on all that my work allowed me. From my earliest youth, it was the custom in our house to strictly observe Shabbat. On Thursday afternoon, my wife would go to the market and buy fish and meat, flour, candles, and all the things that were needed for the Sabbath. On Friday, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I put aside my work, I would close my shop and go to the synagogue, where I would remain and study until night fell, and then I would go home to a wonderful Shabbat meal. Coming toward the house, I would see the lighted candles shining through the window, and I would know that everything was well in my house. But during these last years, the weakness of my old age has come upon me, and I am not as vigorous as I was in my youth. I cannot go out to seek more worth. Therefore, it has been hard these years. There have been days when we did not have a penny for buying bread. On those days, we fasted. For I said to my wife, the people among us are kind-hearted and charitable, and they would be generous towards us if they knew of our plight. But I have lived all my life without asking help of anyone but God, so I would finish my days. Last Thursday, when my wife was ready to go out to the market, she saw that there was no money left in the house, no food, not even a bit of flour dust to bake the bread. She came to me and asked what money I had, but I had earned nothing all day. "Perhaps by tomorrow morning," I said. But Friday morning came, and no work came. So he said to his wife, "Let us fast throughout this Shabbat, but above all, we must not let our neighbors know that we are in need." For the neighboring women would come with meat and fish and Shabbat bread, and we would not be able to refuse their offerings. So they made a plan. He says, "I made a plan, and I said to my wife, I'm going to remain late at the synagogue, later than usual. I'm going to stay until everybody else has gone, and then I can come home without meeting anyone who might ask me, 'Why are there no candles lit in your house?' And I wouldn't have an answer, and I didn't want them to feel obligated to invite us for dinner." And so his wife agreed. And so it happened that the very next day, he stayed at the synagogue, and when darkness came, he walked towards his home. His plan had worked. There was no one else around him. But of course, when he got closer to the home, he saw the light of candles. And he thought, my wife has not been able to withstand this trial. She's taken to ask the neighbors for help. I came into the house, I saw the white cloth spread on the table, and upon it was a beautiful Shabbat meal, fish and meat and challah, soup, wine. I didn't say anything. I simply continued. I blessed the wine, blessed the meal, and we sat down together. Eventually, I asked, and this is what she said. She smiled in a strange, joyous way and laughed at me and said, "My honest Sabbatai, do you remember the costly coat you had when you were young? Your coat with the golden buttons. Today have nothing with which to occupy my hands, so I searched in the old clothes chest and I found your coat. I cut off the buttons and I took them to the goldsmith, and he gave me money, which was how I bought all that we needed for Shabbat. And we even have enough money for food for another day." He looked to the Baal Shem Tov. "Master, my heart was so filled with joy that I could not contain myself. Tears came from my eyes. Once more, I praised God for not having forgotten God's children. And I praised God again and again, happy that God had come to help us. My heart was filled with singing, and I forgot the majesty of the Shabbat. And I took my wife by the hands and led her out, and we danced in our little house. Then we sat down to eat. But when she served the fish, I was so overcome with joy again that I took her in my arms and I danced with her again. And when we ate our soup, we danced a third time and laughed and cried for happiness. For my soul overflowed with the glory of God, and I could not shut my heart over the terrible joy that was in it. The master came to me afterward that perhaps our dancing and laughter had disturbed the sublimity of God's Sabbath. If we have in any way sinned and you've come here to talk to us, we accept the punishment. So spoke the bookbinder Sabbatai, while his wife stood by his side. And then Rabbi Israel said to his scholars and to all who were assembled there, know that all the hierarchy of heaven sang and laughed and were joyful and danced hand in hand with this aged man and his wife when they were happy on Shabbat Eve. And there was a golden joy spread through all, and joy filled the eternal heart. And for the 3 times that you heard my laughter, my friends, I was here with them when they went out 3 times to dance, and I danced, and I sang with them. Joy and laughter are a beautiful expression of not only the wonderful things that happen to our lives, but it's also an expression of our religious and spiritual experiences. And I love when we have those voices of the little kids here to help remind us of the joy that can be found even in things that perhaps we don't expect. At this time, we return the Torah to the Ark. I'd invite you to please turn back to your prayer cards and rise.
Is Chaim hi, lama chazikim ba, betomcheha meushar derachea darchenom v'chon Shalom, Hashivinu, Adonai Elecha, V'nashuva, Kadish, Yaminu Kekedem, Kadish Yaminu Kekedem.
We continue with the words of Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach Adon hakol, la'atis gidula le'atzei Bereshit, shelo asanu p'yei haratzot, ve'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam gelgelu b'hem, ve'lo rodinu k'chol ha'amanam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishpachavim u'modim, לפני מלך, מלך
This time we think of those who are no longer with us. We realize that we are in a period of Shloshim for Maxine Rubin and Rick Pinsky. We keep them in mind together with those for whom we observe yahrzeits this week. For Emma Ock, Rosalind Levitt Bamberger, Bernard Beeman, Mike Bondurant, Connie Braun, Carl Cohen, Marvin Cooper, Rachel G. Kramer, Joseph P. Diamond, Ruth Bussey, Sadie Dorfman, Marjorie Jane Emhoff, Charles H. Fialco, Ruth Getz, John A. Goldswig, Yale J. Holt, Harry Israel Jr., Jacob Kappel Jacobs, Samuel J. Jaffa, Aaron Knoll, Molly Cussworm, Miriam H. Margolis, Victor Pullman, Solomon Rao, Eleanor Seidel, Louis N. Saldoff, Herman F. Slutsky, Roy Stepp, Vesta Frank Tarski, Herta Wells, Sophia Wolf. I invite you at this time to call forward other names or perhaps pronounce names more correctly. If my hand goes past yours, please share with us. We hold them in our heart. I invite those who are remembering or in mourning to please rise first. And we as a community rise as we offer support through the ancient words of the Mourner's Kaddish, which can be found on the bottom of the backside of your prayer card. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach chirte v'yamlich mochote, B'chayechon v'yomechon, uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, b'gala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei amaya. Yitvarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemei dekudsha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran v'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, huya asei shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. Amen.
Amen.
We continue together with our closing prayer. We thank you, O God, for our family and for what we mean and bring to one another. We are grateful for the bonds of loyalty and affection which sustain us, and for the capacity to love and to care. Bless our family, our congregation, and our people with health, happiness, and contentment. Above all, grant us the wisdom to build a joyous and peaceful home in which your Spirit will always abide. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
In just a
shalom.
moment, hopefully you will be joining us for dinner as we make our way to the Great Hall. We will then at that time have an opportunity for us to say our blessings over our candles and our wine and our challah, all of these joyful things that bring us perhaps laughter on Sundays and other days, our sustenance. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.